Yeah, and let's just take it to our whiteboard. Okay. So yeah, so explain how subsidies for all Vietnamese goods and a boycott of Chinese goods, say, are expected to help Vietnamese goods to compete with Chinese goods. Use demand and use supply and demand diagrams to support your answer. Okay, so basically we'll just take these two things. It's an explain question again, so that you don't have to discuss कोई conclusion नहीं करनी है, कोई two sided कुछ नहीं है. So let's just start off. It wouldn't be, I don't think it's needed here, but a one line about subsidies defining them wouldn't be amiss. Like एक line लिख लो just to define them. क्या है? It's basically a grant or a cash payment or a transfer payment rather made by the government to producers to and now this is where it's important to lower their costs of production. What does lowering their costs of production do? It basically increases yeah, increases supply. So yeah, and please don't miss links. Like don't be like subsidy दोगे तो supply will shift to the right. Take आराम से explain करो, cost of production कम होगी, that would increase supply, so supply curve shifts to the right. And because they said you need to use diagrams, even if they didn't, you should have used one anyways here. So you basically just draw a diagram to show what happens. You have price, you have quantity. This is for any particular good, right? कोई macro diagram नहीं मांग रहे. So you have demand and subsidy से demand effect नहीं होगी. Or what will happen is that as your supply shifts to the right, the main thing you need to show here is that how the price of a good goes down. That's the main thing. Again, because this is for Vietnamese goods. So price of the subsidized goods goes down, hence can compete with the cheap Chinese products. Sorry, these are imports. I mean, like imports from Vietnam's perspective, exports from China's perspective. So yeah, if you explain this right, you should get 3 marks for this. Will really not take you guys a lot of time. It should be pretty straightforward. So yeah, so subsidies for all Vietnamese goods expected to help Vietnamese goods compete with Chinese goods. Okay, and a boycott of Chinese goods. Okay, so now I'm not entirely sure of this, so let's hope I get this right. So boycott means you're it's willingly you're not going to buy it basically, like you like, especially it's more effective if it's on a widespread, it's on a wider level. But to my understanding, this should affect demand for Chinese products. ऊपर हमने and make it clear when you write the answer, ऊपर हमने बस supply conditions of Vietnamese products की बात की थी. Let me just in fact just write it. This is for Vietnamese products. Now we're talking about Chinese products. So I think a boycott for Chinese products should decrease demand, which you can then show on the diagram. The reason I'm a little uncomfortable with this is because of something which you guys will see very soon. क्या हो गया? Okay. So we have price, we have quantity, and again, clarity in answers is very important. Just make sure to show the exam you're talking about uh, China wale products. You can even write it DC and SC and either V लिख दो just to make it clear. Demand अगर कम होगी because people are just not buying it. The thing you can show is how now, and the thing you might want to focus on is how consumption of Chinese products with regards to quantity has gone down. Price भी कम हो जाएगी, that should make them cheaper. But if this price ka decrease is brought about by a decrease in demand rather than an increase in supply, that should still be fine because the quantity has gone down, right? So if the quantity has gone down, if you're not consuming from, let's say, Chinese products, it's likely, I'm not too sure about the validity of the second diagram, but I'm just drawing on the basis of what I think should happen. It's likely that the demand conditions of Vietnamese goods, DV agar hum bole, and supply of Vietnamese goods, that the demand of Vietnamese goods might increase, which is good because it shows then that more is being consumed of Vietnamese products, which is exactly what you want to happen, because आप उनसे खरीद रहे होगे तो they can continue to produce. Once they continue to produce, then they continue to provide employment and stuff of that sort. Basically, and you just put whatever I just said into words, less being consumed of Chinese products, thus consumption or excess consumption may be fulfilled by Vietnamese producers. Any questions so far? Is anyone still there? Okay. Okay, so let's check the marketing scheme and see how accurate we were. Chalo, say 1C. For a diagram, 1 mark for a correct shift of curve and 1 mark for change in equilibrium, price and quantity. So like, don't draw lazy diagrams like I did, just when I bas price dikhaya, quantity dikhai. Obviously, especially when they say supply and demand diagrams, so definitely tab to sharafat se sahi bana dena, like label it properly and everything and stuff like that. So just diagrams aapko 2 mark mil sakte hain. It's nice. So we got 2 marks. ऐसी तफरी में. Explanation of the expected help as a result of subsidies. Okay, so subsidies के लिए 3 mark, इसके लिए 3 mark, and let's see what they want. The diagram should show an increase in supply. We got that right. Of Vietnamese goods as a result of their subsidies and a fall of their price. An explanation, which is basically what we wrote underneath it, should also accompany this diagram. So yeah, so very simple. You can easily get 3 marks. Okay. So let's, what I'm more worried about is this. So okay, now I think we got this right as well, because the diagram should show a decrease in the demand for Chinese goods or an increase in the demand for Vietnamese goods in the case of a boycott. We should both, because I'm over efficient there. So yeah, and you explain that as well, which we did, so you should get 3 marks. And this is also an acceptable approach, but it's not one that's ideal, not one that we took. Are we good with this question? Can we move on to the next one? Any questions with this?
No. No.
So yeah, who do we still have left? We have you guys. Okay. So the last, let's go to part D. And understand, don't force your answers to match the case study, right? Like either dekho, so like if you really look here, so part A mein we did the case study, part B mein we did not need the case study because हमें खुद से बताना था. Part A के part 2 mein we didn't need it. In part B we still didn't need it per se, but like the two factors the Marshall Lerner one हमने खुद से बताया, but the devaluation was already in the case study, so that is something that can help you. Here we didn't need the case study, and I don't think there be probably a case study की जरूरत नहीं होगी. So there may be some case studies where you need the case study, or like in a lot of the questions there may be some where you don't need it at all. So just do what seems right. Like don't worry or panic or try to find trends. Like don't be those people जो कहते हैं नहीं मेरे MCQs में ना 4-5 C आ रहे थे तो मतलब मैं गलत कर रहा हूँ. Like just do whatever is seems right. Okay, so let's get it. Okay, so discuss whether the principles of comparative advantage would justify the support of Vietnam's government for the development of all industries in Vietnam, or just those that have the potential to compete. So बोल क्या रहे हैं कि as per the principle of comparative advantage, should you support the development of those industries? Should you protect only those industries that have the potential to compete, that can by potential to compete, मतलब कभी one day maybe they could compete without protection basically, or should you protect all industries? And this was something that you don't need the case study for this, but it was something that was mentioned in the case study about how they're considering whether to provide subsidies to all of these producers or just to the producers that could compete in the future. Understand that in case study कुछ छोटे questions होते हैं. It's a bit different from your section B. So even if it's a discuss type question, you should still, where needed, provide appropriate definitions. You should still provide at least a choti si, like 1 markish type conclusion. Usually they don't require a conclusion in discuss type questions in the case study, but it's no harm, like just to be on the safe side, because you are debating on something after all. Right, so let's just go. So we define the principle or the law of comparative advantage. Anyone remember what that was? Very
एक कंट्री ज्यादा एफिशिएंट होती है ना एक गुड प्रोड्यूस करने में दूसरी से.
Okay, so basically the law of comparative advantage जो है, that is where one country has a lower domestic opportunity cost in producing a good / service than another country. Be careful with using the word efficiency. If you remember, even in absolute advantage क्या था? Absolute advantage still was about efficiency. It was saying that both countries are assumed to have equal resources, like equal inputs, but one country produces more outputs than the other. So that's still being efficient. They're more efficient. However, comparative advantage talks about relative efficiency. Your efficiency in one product compared to the other product, and that ratio is compared to the other country. So you can mention here, takes relative efficiency into account. So this was comparative advantage. What does the law of comparative advantage say? Basically, you should produce / specialize in what in the product. Well, by you I mean the economy, a little informal, but care. But you have a comparative advantage in. So that's basically the law of comparative advantage, right? So you just maybe will get 1 to 2 marks, probably just 1 mark on it, just to tell what comparative advantage hai kya. Then you get to the actual debate, where you will obviously give a two-sided answer because it is a discussed question. So one side you will say that comparative advantage does justify supporting all countries. The other side you'll say it will only justify supporting those that have the potential to compete. So let's go to the potential to compete wala pehle. So here you could use the what we call the infant industry argument. You also call this the sunrise industry. पूरा लिखूंगा नहीं, but the basic idea is because now they're just starting up, their comparative advantage hasn't been fully developed. They might not necessarily be able to compete with larger firms abroad with their own economies of scale, and hence they need at least short-term protection and encouragement, right? So that's one. So that's one argument for protecting only those that have the potential to compete. Can we think of any other uh, arguments for only those that have the potential to compete? Um, while brainstorm about that, let's also keep brainstorming for those that for the arguments for all industries. So like all industries में वो दूसरी arguments आती हैं, like your declining industry. Declining industry argument क्या आती है कि industry decline कर रही है, it will eventually collapse, which is why it can't compete internationally. However, you don't want massive unemployment, at this point, so you just allow it to decline, so that people can train and find other jobs and so on. It just slows down the process of unemployment. It's not a vast influx. So you avoid vast influx of unemployment, what we used to call structural unemployment, in fact. You can talk about the strategic, strategic industry भी इधर I guess आ सकता है, because a strategic industry might never really have the potential to compete, but you just want to protect it because of strategic reasons. Could include anything uh, based on like say, agriculture भी हो सकता है. It could be arms and ammunition stuff, anything that would give you strategic advantage if you can't trade as freely as you normally would. So all industries के थोड़े से एक दो ऐसी चीजें ऐसे आ सकती हैं. Potential to compete में I'm sure there's another thing. I can't think of it off the top of my head. But खैर ऐसी टेंशन की बात नहीं. We'll check the marking scheme as well. But what I think the conclusion should be about that you should tie this like ऊपर आपने one side you've talked about the arguments that help those that have the potential to compete, right? One side you talked about arguments for all industries. In conclusion, you need to bring back the idea of comparative advantage and how comparative advantage would probably want to protect those that have the potential to compete, right? So comparative advantage, the principle जो है इसका, uh, it might be against protecting all industries, right? Because the idea of comparative advantage is that you allow comparative advantage to develop, you specialize, because the assumptions that even the law makes is about free trade, and you're restricting that by having protectionist policies, right? So they're not going to be too excited about that. However, in fact, let's just put this back here. Let's just continue the conclusion here. You could just say that this principle can be used to justify the protection of some industries, because while protectionism is normally seen to be inconsistent with the principle of comparative advantage and free trade and all, because because this allows comparative advantage to develop so that the country can in the long run maybe specialize in it and and produce that more, because the principle of comparative advantage, I think, was the Hershey-Olin's model, recent economic model, is that way you should just produce what you have a comparative advantage in. But if protectionism helps you develop that comparative advantage and eventually produce in what you have a comparative advantage in, it could be argued that you are consistent with the law of comparative advantage. So this wasn't the easiest of questions, at least I didn't find it so, but let's see what the marking scheme has to say about it. Okay, so for clear understanding of comparative advantage with lower opportunity cost, so you would get this mark at least. एक mark तो मिल रहा है. for application of the principle of comparative advantage, showing how the principles can be used to justify support for infant industries. Oh, so we didn't need another thing. 3 mark is ऐसे ही मिल जाएंगे. How the principle does not justify support for industries that lack the required potential, like declining and strategic. Um, okay, and for reason conclusion. Okay, so like again here, so they did give a mark with reference to the principle of comparative advantage. And let's read the guidance. The principle of comparative advantage states that countries should specialize in the production of those goods that they can produce at the lowest opportunity cost. Those goods that have the potential to compete could be considered as the infant industry, and they are the ones that could develop the lowest opportunity cost. Economic theory suggests that these industries should be supported. So if you go back to what we wrote, I think it is similar. It is along the lines of what we needed to write. So you started off, you get 1 mark for just telling what comparative advantage is. You say how comparative advantage can be used to support those that have the potential to compete, and we only needed to talk about the infant industry argument. Either the content is a bit broken up because हमने थोड़ा सा इधर mention किया, थोड़ा सा conclusion में mention किया, but overall you can get 3 marks in this if you explain it properly. And either where you go against, you could also potentially get 3 marks. Conclusion का उन्होंने एक floating mark, I think it was a floating mark दिया हुआ है. So if you lose out, you can score a mark on the conclusion. Are you guys comfortable with this? Are you guys okay with this question? Like, समझ आ रहा है?
Listen, I have a question about this. So basically, how how we write in the conclusion, how like we basically link it back to comparative advantage. So when we're actually writing about the declining industry or the sunrise industry or whatever, so do we need to do we have to link it back while writing the answer? Can we just write it directly in the conclusion?
So, I think you can do it both ways because the marks that they've given, like even अगर इधर देखो, like जो इधर 3 mark दिए हुए हैं, अगर if they find 2 of the marks above and 1 mark in that sort of conclusion, like they'll still check it, right? So I think you can do it both ways, but maybe you could link it in while you're writing it. Like पहले आपने बताया कि हाँ, the arguments could be for strategic and declining ये वो. However, if you link it to the principle of comparative advantage, it might not necessarily be consistent with it. You could do it there. If you do it there though, then you don't have much to write in your conclusion. I don't think you need. I don't think you need a conclusion in this. It's a floating mark, so yeah, but you could I think you could just do it both ways, like whichever one works when you're writing the answer. जो आपका 12 mark question होता है in section B part B, for that then I recommend that you leave out certain stuff that just for the conclusion, right? Because there you was a 4 mark mandatory conclusion. Here if you think it links well there, and if you think otherwise it's difficult to write enough for 3 marks, just go ahead. वरना conclusion में भी लिख सकते हैं, कोई issue नहीं है.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're good for this case study, which took a long time, in fact, but